Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cashflow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and today we're talking about how the Airbnb fee change impacted hosts starting in October of last year. So first off, what happened? Airbnb announced in August, I think it was, a fee change to their structuring. So basically before they were charging guests roughly 14 to 16% fee for booking on their platform. And our hosts were charging in the United States 3.5%, which was basically covering the credit card processing. So, in a sense, it was relatively free for hosts to list their place on Airbnb, and guests were paying the guest fee essentially for booking. And so, in August of last year, in 2025, Airbnb announced that they were going to get rid of the guest fees and that hosts were then going to get the fee of 15.5%. And if you guys remember all the confusion, if you were in around during that time period as a host, everyone trying to figure out, well, how much should you actually increase your fees by? And the numbers varied from 12% all the way on up to 18.3%. And, I did an episode on that and the math behind it, and why 14.79% was the correct amount. Unless you were doing it differently, then it would be 18.34%. But anyway, regardless of that, fast forward to today, it's been over 6 months since the fee change was initiated for most hosts using a property management software, where everyone now, when you get a booking, Airbnb takes 15.5%. So let's look at the data. Let's talk about cause and effect. This week's episodes are going to be a part 1 and a part 2. In the part 2 episode, I'm bringing on a revenue management specialist who's going to dive into the data, like what he's seeing from the data of pricing and how it's impacting people. What I want to go into today, without spoiling any of that part 2 episode with you, is talk about the economics behind what happens when there's a fee structure change from guests to hosts, and how that impacts people differently, because it's not the same across the board, and why it ties directly into how I believe we should be investing in 2026 into short-term rentals and beyond. So let's get into it now that we understand like the history of what happened. So naturally, whenever there's a fee change from guests to hosts, if the hosts increase their fees, okay, meaning like not increase their fees, increase their prices. So if they were charging $100 before, the guest was paying $114 because of the Airbnb fees. I'm ignoring taxes on this, okay? So let's assume no taxes, no cleaning fees. Just hosts charge $100, they're seeing $100, guest is getting or charging $114, and then the host, their payout from Airbnb looks like about $97. Okay, so now the guest sees $100 unless you've increased your fees by the certain amount, and would go up to, like I said, it was 14.79% to be exact, but essentially 114, 115. So now the guest sees about the same amount as before. Okay. And they're going to pay that. And then Airbnb is going to charge you the 15.5%. So that's what it's looking like today. What actually happened, what we know that happened, is that only 60% of hosts initiated some sort of fee change. Okay. That's a big difference, 60 and 40, meaning 40% did nothing. Okay. 30% increased fees by at least 12%. Okay. And then the other 30% increased fees by 14% or higher. All right. So in reality, only 30% of everybody actually increased their fees by the amount that it would need to offset the fee change to impact someone host's payout. Okay. Remember that number, that 30%. All right. So 30% did another 30% increase their fees by a little bit. Okay. So that means they're going to get paid a little bit less than they would have before, but they're not going to get hit as hard. And then the other 40% remaining didn't change their fees at all. So now they're getting hit with a 15.5% change in their net income. All right. Which is a pretty big number. All right. So what happens economically when we look at a fee change structure change from this? So number one, guests don't see anything different. Okay. The only thing different and I have experienced this, and Still have guests pissed off about the tax side, but is what it is. The only thing different is that Airbnb is saying there's no fees. It's all included. So the price that you see is the price that you get. Okay. So that's number one. And so guests like that. It's very transparent. I mean, as someone who's booking a place, I hate to see, okay, $100 a night, and then I click to book, and then all of a sudden it's changed to 150 a night. And you're like, well, what the heck? It was set $100 a night. And then you're like, oh, the taxes and the cleaning fee, and then the this and that, and the fees, the platform fees. Like, it feels like a bait and switch. Now, is that the host problem? No, it's not. I believe that's Airbnb's problem, but they are the ones with the marketing platform. So they're kind of making it the host problem, right? So from a guest perspective, that looks to be very attractive. Okay. However, from a host perspective, not everybody did the exact same thing. And therein lies the problem. Airbnb wisely, I believe Airbnb wisely knew this. And basically, what they knew is they figured a lot of people wouldn't increase their fees because they didn't understand what to increase their fees by. They thought that they could sneak the fee change into the fall update, and which isn't their biggest update of the year. It's the spring one, just so you know. So they snuck it into the fall update, and they tried to explain the math, but even the math was slightly wonky. Therefore, I had a feeling that Airbnb knew exactly what they were doing, which is hosts are going to take less money, which will make prices cheaper overall for guests. Therefore, we'll get more demand because Airbnb will now be a cheaper platform to use and more people will book our platform. That's what Airbnb was hoping to accomplish. Okay. The problem with that is that, okay, sure, 40% didn't do that, 60% did. And theoretically, overall, if you look at the majority, so the 40% that did and the 30% that only increased their rates up to, I think, 12%, okay, or around there, they increased their rates, but it was only up to 12%. So you have really 70%. Yes, Airbnb, in a sense, accomplished what they were willing to do, is basically get prices down, control the market, and get prices down for hosts. But the problem is they don't realize that there's other booking platforms that hosts are getting on. So what happens is that as the prices are changing, hosts start to do more direct bookings. They start to look at VRBO and other booking platforms, which can cause a change, a pivot from where guests are booking and how hosts are promoting their properties. And now there are more hosts on platforms like VRBO than simply just being on one single platform. So it actually is benefiting VRBO. Now, so that's from the Airbnb perspective. Are they making more money because of the fee change? I do believe so. Airbnb is the winner out of it. Are they the clear winner they were hoping to be? I don't know. Probably not, because I think what's happening and what I'm seeing is that people are having to charge more money, but other platforms aren't charging the same amount in fees as Airbnb is. Airbnb is charging you, if you're hosting, it's charging you 15.5%. That's really, really high. VRBO charges you anywhere from 8 to 13%. So naturally, you're going to appear cheaper on VRBO. So just like hosts aren't equally increasing their rates and to offset this fee change, also the platforms aren't doing the same thing either. And so I don't think it was as huge of a win for Airbnb as what they think it was going to be. But at the same time, they're not going to go back. So that's something to think about from the Airbnb side. So we talked about the guest perspective, the Airbnb perspective. Now let's talk about the host perspective, because this is really what impacts us as listeners of the Cash Flow Positive show. So number one, we talked about not everybody increased their fees. Why is that a problem? And how does that impact me? So what happens when you increase, if you're already operating, if you're not operating yet, you're going to learn this lesson. What happens if you increase your rates in your ranking? You're going to go down, right? So naturally, if everyone increases their rates by the same amount, then you would theoretically stay at the same ranking. However, that's not what happened. Some people increase their rates by more than some people than others, or some people didn't increase their rates at all. So what that means is that they increased their prices, which made them go down in their rankings. Okay. Now, and other people who didn't increase their prices go up in the rankings. So they could like theoretically, like I'm assuming there's some sort of balance between how much you increase your rates and how far you would fall in like the optimal amount to not get surpassed, but there is no way to calculate that. And it's all theoretical. It's interesting to think about, but it is theoretical because every single market's different. And this is really important. What I really want to focus on is every single property is different. So there's something called, we're going to get really technical here. And I apologize if you are not nerdy like me in economics. I studied economics in college. This is Econ 101, though. So anyway, let's learn something new today. There is something called price elasticity, basically meaning the more elastic a product is, meaning the more impacted by changes in demand, the price is impacted. So if you have a product or a property that's not very unique, that's maybe not as desirable as some other properties, basically any change in the market demand has a greater change on your potential revenue. So for example, with a fee change, if I have a very average basic property and I increase the fees, basically my pricing by 15.5%, okay, remember the guests are seeing the same rate. That's not the problem. The problem is the ranking algorithm. The algorithm goes, you just increased your fees. I'm going to ding you in the rankings and you're going to get buried. Now you were ranking maybe higher because you were more affordable, but now you have to cut your prices even further just to compete in the space, right? And now you're making less money. So because your property is not unique, it's not inelastic. Okay, so inelastic properties are properties that are so unique that sure, they can increase their rates, but it has a very nominal effect on how much money they'll actually lose. So if I increase my rates by a certain amount, for every dollar, yes, I will lose potential bookers or potential demand, but it won't be as much or as much of an impact as other people who have less of a unique product. Think about gas prices. Oil, gas, whatever. It's a really good example of this of an inelastic product, right? Like, unfortunately, no matter how much, like, gas prices can jump up 30, 40, 50%, which just seems like a lot, but people will still drive vehicles. People will still buy gas. Now, sure, less and less, like it can't go to infinity, but the reality is like less and less you'll think about biking. If it gets too expensive, if it was $10 a gallon, you might consider biking to work or taking one of those electric scooters, right? Now the electric vehicles start to be more attractive. Okay. And therefore gas is becoming more and more an elastic product because all these other, like there's more electric options now, right? Whereas before, when there were no electric options, it was very inelastic, meaning if prices went up and you still had to commute to work, you were paying just the higher prices. There's not a whole lot you can do, right? Whereas, for example, take a product like peanut butter. I don't know why peanut butter came to mind, but that's what came to mind. Most products are fairly elastic. Peanut butter. People don't need peanut butter to survive. They don't need peanut butter to go to work. They don't need peanut butter. Sure, it'd be nice to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but at the end of the day, if it's too expensive, if peanut butter prices doubled, people would just stop buying peanut butter. Therefore, they can't double because the demand would just drop and fall off a cliff. So unfortunately, peanut butter isn't that unique, right? It's peanut butter, right? It's a highly sought after commodity, just like our properties are in highly sought after vacation markets. But once prices start increasing, demand starts dropping off, and it's at variable rates depending on the type of product you offer. And you could argue that certain vacation rental markets have elasticity or inelasticity. For example, a lot of major cities, you could argue that they are more inelastic than maybe more traditional vacation rental markets, meaning that people will always travel to major cities because people live there. They're drivable, big hubs like airport hubs, and they have more, just because there's more people there, right? So people will always travel. There will be amount of demand. So prices and things could go up in the cities and people will always still travel there. Whereas in vacation markets, if those vacation markets doubled or tripled in prices for the guest experience, not housing prices, but guest experience side, so rentals, restaurants, gift shop died, whatever, everything tripled there, less people would go there. It'd be a big difference than if that happened in a city. That's elasticity. That's what you have to understand about this. So if you don't have a inelastic house, like a really, really unique property, unique amenities, the things we talk about. Remember the moat? This all ties in together, the moat. If you don't have a moat, you can't charge more, because not only will you, and I say can't charge more from the guest perspective. Remember, the guests are seeing the same prices before. So that's irrelevant. It's to the ranking algorithm if you're on Airbnb. So number one, hosts need to, and they're already doing this naturally, move to VRBO and other booking platforms, right? Because they're charging less of a fee. So if you haven't already done that, then you need to go and do it. This is your sign. This is your podcast episode. Go and do that. Number two, your product, depending on the type of property you have, you really need to review this. If you don't have a moat, you're going to get smoked big time. If you do have a moat, the ranking algorithms say, you know what, you increase your prices, but you are reliable. We talked a lot about this. I did a ranking algorithm, like what impacts the ranking algorithm, and reliability is more important than any other metric. I don't care about pricing. I don't care about your rankings and reviews. Reliability, meaning how many guests click your property and actually book it, then your rating and reviews and your pricing. You could have the dumpiest property in the world. Sorry, inverse. The dumpiest property in the world. But if you're getting booked, every single person that clicks on your property and books it, Airbnb is going to be like, this is a solid property. We don't know why it's solid, but we're going to increase in the rankings because it's making us money. Go on Amazon today, type in TVs. The first TVs that are listed aren't the TVs with the highest reviews, aren't the TVs that, the sexy LG brands or whatever. It's the TVs that sell. Okay. It could be based on price. It's not even based on price. It's not even sorted on price. You can sort on price. You can sort on reviews. It's a combination of most. And 9 times out of 10, it's the TV that's just most frequently bought is the one that they promote the highest, because that's what sells. That's how Amazon makes their money. It's not about the best rated TVs. That has a factor. So does price, but it's a combination of all of these things. And that's what the algorithm's looking at. So if you come in and you increase your prices and the property and nothing has changed and your reviews are the same, you're going to drop unless you have a unique property, meaning that you are still getting booked no matter what. The algorithm is going to artificially keep you up regardless of the price change. That would be an inelastic type of property. So when you're thinking about this and what's going on, okay, this is all, trust me, you're definitely going to want to listen to the part 2 episode, because the data is going to come in and you'll be like, it makes sense. It's just what he's talking about. It's the economics of it. Understand the economics, the cause and effect, the supply and demand, and you'll be able to foresee and predict and really forecast your next moves within the next 6 months to a year based on what's going on in the market. So for me, if I don't have a unique property or something that, for example, one of my properties, because of the regulation, there can be no more supply. Well, guess what? It makes it very inelastic in terms of demand. People are still paying me. I'm making the same amount as I was last year, or if not more, even with the fee changes, because I increased my rates to offset the fee. And people are paying the same amount and they feel like they're getting a deal because it's all the fees included. I'm not getting charged any extra because, I increased my rates, and I'm not dropping in the algorithm because there's only a few other properties that are competing with me. It's a win-win, right? So how can we, the lesson, it's a theme every single time. I swear it comes back to this. How can we find the property with the moat, the inelastic property? No property is going to be perfectly inelastic. I think that's important. Meaning you can't just raise your rates forever and people are always going to book. There's going to be some drop off, but we want to look for these properties where fluctuations in the market, fluctuations with Airbnb's fee changes and how they do things, that has very little to low impact on your property and how you make money. Unfortunately, a lot of hosts are going to lose money this year. They won't know it until they look at their net. They'll look at their gross and be like, oh, well, I'm making about the same. But then that fee change hits, right? It's already hit, but then that, like when they're doing their accounting. I think a lot of people at the end of this year, 2026, are going to look at their books and go, wow, I actually netted less money than I've made in previous years, although I could have grossed the same amount of money. Most people track their gross only until it's tax season when they finally get the final bill, right? So because it's easy to track, Airbnb tells you your gross. Nobody's looking at the net, what the net payout is, what the net income is after all your expenses. That's what you need to be tracking. And the people who are tracking are noticing a particular trend that we're going to talk about in the part 2 episode. Okay. But remember, every property is different. The more unique it is, the less impact that the fee change has. So when we're looking for deals in 2026, we need to be looking for properties that have the moat, that are in the right locations, that have the unique amenities. And I say unique amenities. I mean, obviously that can vary, but like our nice properties that you've invested into. Those are the ones that are seeing the good returns and that are doing very well. So, with all this being said, don't lose hope, don't lose faith, do it the right way because the economics backs that up. It tells you exactly what's going to happen. It tells you exactly how you should invest and what to look for with your next property. My name is Kenny Bedwell. This is the Cash Flow Positive Show, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.